Hello, it's Ian here with HobbiesofaMan once again, and today we're going to be doing another wrap-up video for the month of February. Today we're going to be looking at what I read, what I watched, and just talking about all of it in a little bit of detail, just so we can kind of have a discussion about all the stuff that I've been able to read. So let's start with what I've been watching, and then we'll get into the reading. So starting off with One Piece Stampede, I don't think this is the first thing I watched this month. I think it was actually one of the last ones that I did, but it's kind of like a single entity, so I think it's better to talk about it first. I've already watched this a few times. I've already talked about it on the channel. I think I didn't do a review for it, but I did a video where I compared it and contrasted it with three other different One Piece movies right before Film Red came out, and generally speaking, I think those thoughts hold. I think it's probably the best One Piece movie, followed by Z, then Red, and then Gold, and then Strong World. I really didn't like Strong World, but One Piece Stampede is awesome. It's more of a celebration of One Piece than it really is like a proper movie. Like, it's honestly just one huge fight, which I guess is kind of most anime movies. But like the My Hero Academia movies do have a little bit of a story there, and they kind of do tie into the actual story, even if they're not like 100% canon, right? One Piece Stampede is clearly not canon, but it wouldn't be too hard to make it work, right? If you make it right before Wano, right after Whole Cake, and somehow you get all of the characters to be there when some of them should be in the Reverie, it kind of works, right? But it is not actually canon. But it's just really fun. You get to see all the supernovas. I think Blackbeard doesn't show up at all in this movie, which is generally kind of interesting because you end up having this big bad guy who, I think his name was something Bullet. And he's basically like a Kaido type character, right? And then you have this giant like battle, like Luffy versus this giant mecha thing. And it's really, really fun. And the way that some of the characters join up actually works really well. Like, Luffy ends up teaming up with Boa, of course, with Smoker, with Sabo, who then uses this like other devil fruit to kind of make a fake Ace that he can fight with, which is cool. Crocodile shows up a little bit. Rob Lucci shows up a bit as well. Just the ending battle was really cool, and I really enjoyed it. It's a little bit ridiculous. It reminds me of the first My Hero movie, where it's just like this giant monster. But it ends up being really fun and really enjoyable. So overall, pretty good stuff there with One Piece Stampede. And then I watched Kamen Rider Black Sun. This is my first proper introduction to the Kamen Rider franchise and to tokusatsu that wasn't Americanized, like Power Rangers. And I really enjoyed it, actually. Technically, I have read some tokusatsu style manga before, like Ultraman and Kamen Rider Kuga. And there's another one. I don't remember what it was. But, you know, I do have some experience with tokusatsu, but I had never actually watched a proper Japanese tokusatsu story. And Kamen Rider Black Sun was a really interesting one. It was like an adult show. It is, I would say it's the Japanese equivalent to like an HBO style show. Of course, it's not really the same. And the fact that it's tokusatsu makes it a little bit campy feeling, even though maybe it shouldn't have been. But generally speaking, it was really, really good, really enjoyable. I thought it was awesome. It worked really well. The only characters I didn't really like were the young girl that's kind of the impetus for the story. Mostly because her story arc didn't really like do anything. Like she started off with an ideology. She goes through, and her experiences should have really made her see that the situation was not possible. But she doubles down on her beliefs, and then she radicalizes, right? But I don't feel that was like a good way of using that character. It would have been better if she started off more neutral and then became like interested in the plight and then became radicalized. But you know, it is what it is. But that story was really cool, really interesting. I really like the character design and the outfit designs, the suit designs for Kamen Rider, and besides some issues with the world building where like the origin of Kaijin, which are the monster characters, didn't really make sense to me. And the fact that they were supposed to be like created, but a lot of them clearly would have not been able to be created and had like very long standing like histories and names that didn't fit the world building situation that was established. Kind of made it a little bit worse than I really wanted it to be, but I gave it like a solid 7 or 8 out of 10, I think. No, actually, I don't remember what I gave it. I don't remember what I said I would give this story, but I think I gave it a really high score initially. And now that I'm, you know, a little bit further away from that story, it's a little bit easier to give it a worse score than initially thought, right? So right now I'm sitting at like a 7 or 8, where initially I thought it was like a 9 or a 10. Okay, I double checked. It says 8 out of 10, pretty great. Now a Toku fan, which is true. I am definitely interested in Tokusatsu. I have the Tokusatsu page open, and there's a bunch of streaming options that you can have on that website. So I'm probably gonna just start going through all of the Kamen Rider stuff, but I'm gonna skip the first Kamen Rider, the original one, or maybe only watch the first 13 episodes and then move on, because I know that it's really old and it's not gonna be fun to watch as a person that's very into modern stuff. So I'll probably start with Kamen Rider Kuga and then move on and try to catch up to whatever the newest season of Kamen Rider is, right? So yeah, Kamen Rider was really, really cool, really enjoyable. We have Killing Bites. This is a single season of anime. It was 12 episodes, and it came out a few years ago, so it's kind of in like season 2 hell. Like, it's probably never going to come out. And honestly, it really just felt like a way to market the manga. But the manga is not really available in English. It kind of is through this company called Metabang, which apparently is like a a translating company that does a lot of work for a lot of different companies. And they decided to sell some of the stuff on their own on Bookwalker. Most of the stuff they sell is like H manga, but some of the things they sell are actually like proper normal manga. And they do have 4 or 5 volumes of Killing Bites. They're about $4 each, but they're not really the best. Like, they're not really great volumes. And so I was honestly pretty sketched out about the fact that they existed, and I wasn't really sure if I would want to buy them, because, you know, I was unsure about where they came from. So I decided not to. But Killing Bites is a pretty interesting story. It's basically like a battle royale with furry characters in it, like Juni Tyson, or maybe kind of like Record of Ragnarok, but like, well, actually not Record of Ragnarok. It's more like Kengan Ashura, if you guys have seen that. But instead of having like generic like backstreet brawlers, you have these people that are all more or less criminals that have gone through experimentation to give them these like animal-based abilities, and they all kind of have the ability to transform into a specific animal, right? So the main character is the Brute Rattel. So she is a Rattel Therianthrope, so she can turn into a honey bear, or a honey badger, sorry. And there's a bunch of other characters. The main bad guy, or the main like opponent for her, ends up being this dude called Brute Pangolin, who is a pangolin, obviously. But there's a lot of different characters that show up, and a lot of them are kind of interesting. Sometimes their abilities and their kind of animal characteristics aren't really about the actual animal, but rather the perception of the animal. So like the snake character, the snake brute, is kind of more of a like what you would imagine the snake is if you only really knew about like pop culture like versions of snakes, like I don't know, like the snake that made Adam and Eve eat the apple of Eden or whatever. Like that sort of kind of like sly, cunning, evil kind of snake. And not necessarily like just a generic like snake that you would think like a real snake would be like, right? And stuff like that. It was really fun, actually. I enjoyed it, but it had a lot of ecchi content in it. So if you're not someone that enjoys fan service, probably stay away from Killing Bites. Then I watched a bunch of Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, and mostly just because tomorrow the new season comes out, so I wanted to catch up and remember all of the stuff. And man, the Mandalorian is awesome. Both seasons are great. There's really 1 or 2 week episodes in all the 16 chapters. However, the Book of Boba Fett is so bad in comparison. Like I kind of enjoyed it while I first started watching it, like when it was releasing, but it was so bad. So I had to skip the first 4 episodes and just went straight into episode 5, which is The Mandalorian 2.5, basically. And those episodes were great. The last episode, episode 7, was okay. Mostly I just liked the Mandalorian action that happened in it, but the storytelling aspect was really poor. Like, it was just so bad. So it is what it is. But overall, everything that has the Mandalorian in it is awesome. Everything that is not related to the Mandalorian is pretty bad. In most cases, it's just episodes 1 through 4 of Book of Boba Fett. But if you haven't yet, I do recommend you watch Book of Boba Fett, because that is an important aspect of the story up to the start of season 3 of The Mandalorian. Because Book of Boba Fett basically functioned as a season 2.5. It was like a bridge, I think is what Pedro Pascal called it. So, if you haven't watched it yet, at least watch episodes 5, 6, and 7. And you can go back and watch the Boba Fett episodes later. But, definitely give that a try. And then I watched some Last of Us. I don't remember which chapters I've seen. I've not caught up to the latest episode. Sorry. Everything has a different name for like an installment. So sometimes it gets all jumbled up in my head. But I've not caught up to the latest episode. But I think episode 6 was the last one that I watched. And honestly, The Last of Us is awesome. Pedro Pascal is a great actor. The relationship he has with Ellie is really interesting, and I really like those characters. But I'll leave all of my thoughts for an actual review. So that's all I've been watching. That was actually a little bit longer than I was expecting it to go for, but it is what it is. So, let's get into what I've been reading. Let's start with novels. So here you have Lord of Goblins, Volume 3. I finally finished it. I will review it this upcoming Saturday. Overall, it was really good. They stopped focusing on the flashbacks to explain Lev's backstory, and they focused completely on the goblin aspect of the story. It's a proper isekai now, instead of this kind of like mix and matching of two kind of stories into one, which I think is great. It was a good move. They did still have some of that stuff happening, but it was mostly as bonus chapters at the end of the book. So if you don't care about it, you can skip it. And if you do care about it, you can read it anyways. And I thought that was a really good way of making that work. But there are still some issues here. I will do a proper review for it. But generally speaking, I think the world building, generally speaking, is really good. This is an epic fantasy feeling story. But I think that the balance of how they do world building kind of sucks. Like sometimes you're like, oh, this is a really important thing. They're probably going to focus on this. And then they just never do. And specifically, I'm talking about this character, Alaric, who shows up. And apparently he's a human character. And he shows up in this book, gets abducted by goblinoids, and then gets taken to the town. But we never actually see what happens to him. And then suddenly in the middle of actually near the end of the book, he just shows up and he's working under some goblin called Bolo. And it's like, dude, that was a very important bit of situations happening there. Why didn't you not explain that? Why did you not establish this first contact story when there was 3 other first contact stories in this book that honestly were pretty generic and probably didn't need to be explained that much? Because in this book, they managed to reach a new city where all of the goblins are going to establish their own kind of city, country place. And so you have a lot of world building in terms of like city development and government development, empire building type stuff. But because they're in a new area, they have to scout out and understand the people and the things that live around them. And so they end up interacting with some bird people, these like Wendigo creatures, some elves, and then of course Alaric the human, or at least that's what it said he was, but I'm pretty sure he was an elf initially. I'm not really sure about that. I think that might have been me misreading it, but you had these 4 different groups. Honestly, the most interesting one would be humans, right? Because Lev was a human at one point, so you might want him to interact with this guy. But that's like swept under the rug, and Lev focuses on interacting with the bird people, the Wendigos, and then realizing what happened with these elf people that attacked them, right? So, I don't know. I thought that was a big blunder there, but everything else was pretty good. It did take a while for me to get back into this world, but generally speaking, I found it to be pretty enjoyable. So, there you go. That's Lord of Goblins. Then I read Soul Leveling number 5, and man, this is probably the best volume I've read so far. I really liked the first one. and whichever one it was that he defeated the guy in the Demon Lord's castle. Like, I think that was volume 3. Really like that one as well. But this one is the best, and it has so much world building, so much development of mysteries that had been happening for the whole story that finally got unveiled. So it was really good stuff. I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really, really well done. So yeah, I already did a review for this, so you can watch that instead if you want like full details on it. But overall, very good stuff. I already have the 6th volume, and I'm gonna read it in March. So I can't wait, and I honestly want to read the whole story as fast as I can. But I'm kind of stuck with the whims of Yen Press and how they decide to release the story, right? So yeah, that's Soul Leveling number 5. Then let's do the comic books, and I only have floppies, so this should be pretty fast. Let me grab them here. Okay, so Last Barbarians, pretty interesting story here. Basically, it's like a Dungeons and Dragons type story. It has a pretty irreverent cast of characters, a lot of comedy bits that really didn't land for me, but the art style is interesting. And generally speaking, I think the story will be pretty cool once it gets going, so I'm pretty excited about this. Although there's a little bit of kind of marketing here that doesn't really work for me. It's one of my pet peeves about comic books, because I am new to comic books, or at least somewhat. And that is that this cover has nothing to do with the art inside, and the art inside is completely different from this. Now, generally speaking, that's not really that big of a deal, but it's a very jarring difference here. And I bought this book because I like this cover, and then I got the book, and I was excited to see more of this style of artwork. And then it wasn't the case that it was like that. But generally speaking, I was still able to enjoy myself, and I'm definitely going to continue reading this because I was pretty interested in the story. The other thing is that this character here doesn't match any of the characters in the story, so I don't know what the heck this character is supposed to be doing here. The main character is some sort of redhead, and there is a character that's blonde that has this kind of like chest armor here that appears at the very end of the book, but they don't seem important to the story yet, so I don't know why they would be the cover character. So honestly, it's not really a difference in art style. It's that the character that's on this cover doesn't match any of the characters inside, and I find that to be kind of annoying, right? I'm not really sure why, I just do. Then we have Dawn Attack. This one is great. This art style matches the inside very well. It's actually by the same guy, by Diego Yapur, and the story here is pretty good. Basically, we get a bit of a flashback, and it has a different art style. It has a different artist doing it, which I think was interesting, and I thought it was a really good way of kind of breaking up the story so that you know, hey, this is a flashback, and then this is the main story. And in the main story, nothing much really happens. She gets on this airplane, or on this spaceship, and she goes somewhere, and then she ends up fighting some like monsters, and her dad shows up at the end, which is who she was looking for. And then the story ends, and that's basically all there is to it. But this is not even halfway through the story, because this is supposed to be a 5-issue release. So I'm interested to see where it goes, and if it goes anywhere. If not, it's cool. I still enjoyed the artwork, and I enjoyed the covers, so overall it's fine. And then we have Death Dealer number 9. Here we learn a little bit about the Hellman, and his relationship with with the kind of mythology of all of the characters that are involved here. And then we also get to see that the sorceress and the sea witch meets with some people, and they end up killing someone. And it might be because they're trying to take over this country so that they can use this giant army this guy has. I'm not really sure. I don't really remember what's going on in the previous issue, but generally speaking, it was a pretty good issue. I enjoyed the second half of the story quite a bit more. Mostly because it feels like it's spinning its wheels a little bit, and it kind of feels very similar to the next story that I'm talking about here, which is Barbaric. And this one and Death Dealer are basically having the same kind of situation going on. They were already similar beforehand. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's kind of interesting to see two completely different stories kind of doing the same plot beats for like kind of at the same time. And nothing wrong with it. It was just kind of interesting to see the two different approaches. I like both of them because this one is kind of irreverent and fun, and it actually really is cool because this one mostly focused on the secondary characters now, which is great because in the previous volume, I felt like Soren was pushed to the side, and it's nice to see her back in the main kind of light of the story, which is great. But it's just kind of odd to read two different stories that basically have the same premise and kind of same situation going on at the same time, right? So yeah, then we have Infernal Girl Red. This one kind of I liked it, but it didn't feel as good as the first issue, and I think that's just because it's the middle chapter. Like, it has to do a lot of setup, but it can't really get exciting because that's for the climax. And generally speaking, I thought it was fun. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like my favorite thing ever. I really like the art style though, and Cassia and her mom are pretty interesting characters. And this evil guy here with this like crazy purple knight armor is really interesting, but he hasn't really done much yet, so I'm excited to see where that goes. But yeah, there you go. There really isn't too much else to say about this one. It's part of the Massiverse, and generally it's pretty fun. Then we have Titans United Blood Pact. I'm so happy this is done. I didn't really like it, but I'm going to keep it because I like the first one, so I'll keep it for now. Probably get rid of it at some point. But generally speaking, the art style is really cool, but the story is pretty bland. Like, nothing really happens here. This whole story just feels like it's spinning its wheels. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be a middle chapter to like a larger Titans United story or something like that. But it does end with like resetting the timeline so that you can have another story happen. And honestly speaking, I think the first story, the first Titans United story, was significantly better than this one. So it is what it is. Then we have The Least We Can Do, number 6. This is the end of this part of the story, and I'm not going to continue collecting it. I didn't really end up liking it. Mostly it just focused on, like, how do I word this? So it had a pretty interesting premise. It had a pretty interesting background world building, like for the magic system and stuff like that. But it never really did anything with the magic system. And it just had fights because, like, it's a comic book and it should have some, like, physical conflict. But generally speaking, it just felt like they were just parading all of these, like, non-standard, like, characters in front of you. Like, oh, look at this old guy with feelings, and look at this really crazy strong chick that's super muscular, and then look at this, like, really cutesy dainty girl and how their kind of relationship turns from antagonistic into lovers. And then this, like, dude that wore, like, a bunch of, like, fetish gear, and he was kind of, like, dramatic, which I guess is like a representation for gay people. I'm not really sure. Like, it was just a lot of this type of stuff where it was like, okay, these are really cool characters. I love the representation aspect of it and stuff like that. But you're not really telling me anything or doing anything with these characters besides just parading them around, right? And this seems kind of harsh because generally I wasn't really saying anything bad about this story beforehand. But the fact that it just didn't go anywhere was really upsetting to me. So now all of these things that I was okay with before feel like flaws because it just took an L, right? So I'm going to try to do a proper review for this and kind of explain my feelings better about it. But generally speaking, it was like really cool premise, really cool system, but then nothing happened because the authors, the writers, who do a lot of works that are very similar to this in terms of like how they look and how they feel, basically just wanted to focus on parading these characters that were supposed to be like representation bait, basically, instead of like actually doing anything with them. And that's kind of lame, right? So it didn't really feel that great. However, this back thing here that's supposed to be the cover for the paperback looks awesome. However, this character up here is a woman, and they just look like a generic evil bad guy, even though they're not even a bad person. Like, they're not even bad guys, but they just look like a very generic, like, bad person, like an evil character. So it looks awesome, but I don't really like how it like portrays the character that it's portraying. So, you know, I just have a lot of issues with this story, apparently. I don't know. Maybe I'm just salty. Then we have Dead Lucky number 6. This one was pretty good. Generally, this is also the end of this arc. I'm curious to see where Dead Lucky, volume 2 goes. But I'm kind of happy it's over, because if it kept going on for longer, I would have probably had to drop it, because it's enjoyable, it's interesting. But again, it feels like it's mostly focusing on the real world aspect that this is representing, more than it is about like the badass soldier chick with like dead people helping her, right? So I don't know. I think that's mostly my fault though, because the whole book has been mostly about like, hey, this is about people that are soldiers that have PTSD and how they're trying to put their life back together. And the whole book and the kind of back pages and stuff like that, the author's note and all the stuff around it are also about that type of stuff. So I just feel like it could have done with a little bit more action, a little bit more development of the characters, besides the fact that they're soldiers with PTSD, and just kind of developing them a little bit more and kind of making the story, the action of the story feel a little bit more exciting. But again, because this is a what's it called, a Massiverse story, I'm willing to cut it a little bit of slack, because this is mostly just a bunch of setup before it gets into like the big stuff, right? So I'm okay with it, it's fine. So I'm gonna do a proper review for this as well, all 6 issues, and I'll talk about it more in depth. But generally speaking, I thought it was good. I just feel like it could have focused a little bit different ways, or it could have focused in a little bit of different ways in different areas, because I think it hyper focused on one part and kind of made all of the other stuff less interesting in comparison. And I would have liked it to be a little bit more balanced, if that makes sense. So there you go. That's Dead Lucky number 6. We have Rogue Sun number 10. And yeah, this one's good. We get introduced to a new Rogue Sun character, because basically this is like a haunted stone, and we get access to this like original Rogue Sun, which is interesting. And they end up having to go to this place that actually is so interesting and so different that it even changes how the orientation of the comic is. Like, they enter this like hell thing, and then they have to turn this way so that you can capture what it's saying, right? And then the rest of the story happens in this style, which is really cool. I actually enjoy that. I think the thing about the Massiverse is that even though some of the times the stories don't really feel that exciting for superhero stories, or for Power Rangers or Tokusatsu type stories, they're very inventive with the way they make things work, right? There's a new Massiverse story coming out called No One, and that one also has a audio drama or a podcast involved with it, which is interesting. It's kind of like a very big multimedia, but also like manipulating the main media kind of vibe to it, and I really like it. I think it's really cool. But, you know, sometimes they really should focus a little bit more on making the stories enjoyable, beyond the fact that there's like really cool stuff going on alongside them, right? So yeah, then we have Unbreakable Red Sonja number 3. This one is mostly just like Red Sonja is taking care of a kid, and she gets injured, and now the kid takes care of her, and then they end up in a place that's confusing and not like they thought it was, which is basically the same as every other Red Sonja story. But I don't know, I like this one, and I really enjoyed these covers more than anything, so I'm gonna finish collecting it because there's only 2 more volumes left. And generally, I do like it. I think it's fun and interesting to see Red Sonja interacting with herself, basically, a younger version of herself, and I think it's a cool kind of like situation. So yeah, that's Red Sonja Unbreakable. And finally, we have Moon Knight number 20, which I didn't really care for. There wasn't really anything here that was really interesting, and I think I'm gonna eventually drop this like completely, because it kind of overstayed its welcome. At this point, I don't really care anymore. However, I am gonna wait until after a certain issue comes out, and that would be the Venom and Moon Knight team up, because I found that to be very interesting in concept, so I want to see what that is. And then after that, I'll drop the story if I'm not interested any longer. So it is what it is, but you know, that's it for Moon Knight. There was also a Blade story in this, but I really couldn't be bothered to read it, so I'll have to come back and read this properly next time, some other time, right? So yeah, that's it for that. Now let's get into the manga here. And I read a lot of manga, but mostly it was single volumes, and it was mostly all volume 1s. So I read Your Lie in April, volume 1. This one was pretty good. But because it's a music manga, I'm probably going to read watch the anime instead, just because I think that the music type medium, or like the stories in manga about music, don't really work for me, because like I want to hear the music, right? So I want to see it like performed. I feel like it's pretty important to have that auditory element there, and manga can't provide that, so I'm gonna probably end up watching the anime instead. But the way the first volume ended didn't really leave me hungry for more. Like, it was interesting and I was interested in more, but also it felt satisfying in the way that like the mystery is there for you to contemplate what happens after, and I thought it was really good. So I'm willing to just let it be and just not go back to the story ever again. Then we have My Idol Sits in Desk Over. This one was pretty good. It's a Yuri Idol series kind of thing. Basically, there's two girls. One of them is a very generous fan, and the other one is kind of like a yandere type fan. And they both end up going to the same school as their favorite idol singer, and so they end up becoming friends with her. And the nice girl ends up being friends with her for the sake of being friends, and then the other girl ends up being friends with her in order to kind of make her fall in love with her because she's that obsessed with the idol. And all of these three girls basically end up having to have this like balancing act between them that is generally really good. I didn't really know it was a Yuri beforehand. I thought it was going to be like a generic boy meets a hot girl and then she changes his life kind of thing. But I liked it. I thought it was really cute. And generally I did enjoy it. But yeah, Shikamori is not just a cutie number one. I had I had 5 volumes of this. I think there's actually 21 of these. And I liked it, but I feel like this is a very specific type of manga, one that you don't really want to read all the time, but rather, or like one that you don't want to binge in one go, but rather you want to read when you're feeling a certain like kind of way, and you want a little bit of a pick-me-up. So that's when I read the first one, and I think that's when I'm going to read the rest of them, so I'm just going to have to wait until I feel like that again. So it is what it is, but it was pretty good. I don't know how they made an anime about this that was like 20 minutes long, like 20-minute episodes, because these are very short situations, and they're mostly just like for a single laugh. Like, I don't know how that worked, but you know, it's okay, I guess. I'm sure it did work because they wouldn't have made a 20-minute episode like a normal episode length anime for this. They would have done like those really short ones, like Miss Ueno is a klutz, or what's the one, Gombare Chan or whatever, like those types of like 3-minute episode kind of things. But I don't know. Then I read My Darling Next Door, and I really like this one. I think I don't honestly remember too much. Yeah, I think I did like this one. It was kind of a gender bent version of Beauty and the Feast, and I really enjoyed that. So yeah. Then we're new at this. This one was pretty funny, but I don't know how long the gimmick for this is, which is basically like I don't know how long the gimmick is going to be able to last. And the gimmick is sorry. I was trying to say like 3 different sentences at once, so I had to go back and say each of them separately. Okay. And the gimmick is that there's this couple, and they're married, but they haven't been able to consummate their marriage, so they haven't had their like wedding night basically. And every time they want to, they end up getting like sidetracked because of something. And the woman is like over this. She's like, no, we're gonna do this. And then they just keep getting into weirder and weirder situations. And it's pretty funny, but I don't know how this will go, like how long it will be able to last, right? Because at some point they have to just get over it and do it, right? So yeah. Then I have 1122 for a Happy Marriage. And I hate this manga so much. It was such a shitty read. Like, I don't know exactly why I hate it. Like, I think it's a combination of things, but primarily I think it's because ultimately when I read manga, I want to escape from what I'm doing right now. Like, and not because I hate my life or anything, but just because I want to experience something different from what I experience daily, right? And 1122 was not an interesting experience. It was a very shitty, boring, mundane, and actually rather sad experience to kind of have to deal with. And I honestly thought about DNFing this story like immediately as soon as I realized what it was about. But I decided to stick through it, and I actually ended up hate reading it, and it was just really, really bad. Basically, there's this married couple, and they've been married, but mostly they married for convenience, for the sake of being married, and they're mostly just friends. This guy, because he is, you know, a normal guy, wanted to have a relationship with this girl that he's married with, but she kind of had this like hang up, and I think her hang up is perfectly understandable, but it's one that really doesn't work for me because she caused the issue, and then she got upset at the issue, you know, bouncing back in her face. And like, I don't know, the characters here was just not appealing, and I didn't really enjoy them, so I ended up disliking the story that they ended up in. And I just really didn't like 1122 for a Happy Marriage. It was really, really bad. Moving on to What I Love About You, though. This one was great. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really, really cute. Basically, these two characters meet at a bar, and they happen to have the exact fetish that makes them a perfect match for each other. So the girl is in love with back muscles, or backs in general, and the guy is in love with long hair. And so the girl has beautiful hair, and the guy has a nice back, right? So they end up moving in together and having this whirlwind romance, and it turns out that they love each other for their fetish, but then they end up realizing that they also love each other for everything else. And it's really good. It kind of reminds me of Sweat and Soap a little bit. And I think that it's one of those stories that initially it's really off-putting because it's weird. But if you give it a little bit of time and you have a little bit of patience, you're going to end up really enjoying it because it's really, really cute and wholesome, even though it does have this kind of initial, like, yikes kind of moment. Very similar to Sweat and Soap, right? So that's it for that one. Then we have Flotori-kun's blank is about to collapse. And this one is okay. I really liked a lot of it, but there's this, like, yikes premise part of the story, which is that this character and his little sister are basically so codependent that it's really odd. And it makes Flotori-kun, the main character, act in a really odd and kind of not healthy way, compounded with the fact that, like, it's a harem anime or harem manga, and the main harem girl, or like the main female character, is this like crazy psycho that no one understands what's going on with, and so it's really weird. And I did like it. Like at the end of the first volume, I was really hooked on the cliffhanger, but I was like, it's just so weird. Like this is not one of those like yikes moments that you can get over. This one is like, the yikes moment is a very important part of the character development, and I don't really want to deal with these like emoto, like sister brother codependency stories because I just don't like them. I think they're kind of like icky, right? So I'm not sure how I feel about this one. I'm gonna have to think about it a little bit. Then I read Rand the Peerless Beauty, #1. And this one was great. It was really, really sweet. It was a very beautiful romance. It's basically like speed running through Komi a little bit, because Komi like spins its wheels. This one kind of has the same basic premise. A very beautiful woman, or girl, I guess. A very beautiful girl that doesn't have any friends, that doesn't really have any people she interacts with. And then she ends up meeting a guy that has like a flower motif to him because, you know, Tadano has the whole little flower thing. Even though it just means that he's ordinary, it doesn't actually mean he has anything to do with flowers. But in Rand the Peerless Beauty, the guy actually does have to do with flowers. And he and Rand actually end up bonding over this, and then they become friends, and then they actually develop feelings for each other very quickly, but also in a very wholesome and beautiful way. And this story was just really, really nice. Someone commented that the story gets so sweet that it's actually kind of saturine, which is actually, you know, kind of usually meant in a negative way, and I do think that the commenter meant it that way. But honestly, maybe sometimes that's exactly what you need. So I'm actually more interested in reading it now than usual because I really like this first volume. And if it gets so sickly sweet, it might be a good palate cleanser for when I'm reading more like serious kind of stories, right? So I'm pretty excited about that. So yeah. Then I skipped Nagatoro. I was going to read it this month, but I decided not to. So I skipped that one. Then I read Harem Marriage #1. This one was a really good story. It's kind of odd. The main character is this woman, and she's a young woman. She moved to Tokyo, and she actually happens to be a very flawed individual. She moves back home because she ended up dating this dude and kind of becoming a homewrecker accidentally, and she decided not to want to deal with that, so she moved back home. Turns out her home is now part of a special plan from the Japanese government that allows for polygamous or polyamorous type marriages. And so she gets prepositioned into being part of one of these marriages. And eventually she agrees because of a monetary problem. And because she realizes, hey, I'm very shallow, but maybe this can work. And then I don't know what happens because that's the end of the first volume. And I was very excited and very interested in this. And I really like all of the characters. The main character is like shallow, but in like an endearing way, which I think is good. The main male character is this like weirdo creep. He kind of reminds me of Severus Snape. And then his two wives are kind of very like traditional Japanese quiet beauty, and then like a more like gal type girl. And all of these characters interact in a very fun and ridiculous and kind of melodramatic way. I'm very excited to see where it goes. So there you go. Then I read Boarding School Juliet numbers 1 and 2, and I like this a lot. This was a really good manga. I really enjoyed it. It's a Romeo and Juliet story in like a magic academy type setting. It's not a magic school because there's no magic, but it kind of has that vibe. So I guess it's just generally like a high school romance story, but in like a private school. And it's really fun. It's a like Romeo and Juliet type story, and it's really enjoyable. Oh yeah, Quintessential Quintuplets number 2. I thought it was fine. I just don't think I like this story, and that's okay, right? It is what it is. Then we have a Couple of Cuckoos number 1. I do have 4 more volumes of this, but I decided to read them at another time. So Couple of Cuckoos is basically, there's these 2 families that have a baby on the exact same day. Their babies, because their names are so similar, actually end up getting switched over. And eventually, when they're teenagers, these 2 families connect with each other and realize, hey, we happen to have the wrong baby, and our kids are teenagers now. What if we meet and try to meet our children properly this time and just deal with the repercussions of the situation and kind of find a way to make this work for everyone, right? And so what happens is that one family is rich and the other one is a normal family, and they decide, hey, we should marry our children together so that we can all actually be a family together, and that we're all both family members to our actual child, but also to the child we raised. And the problem is that the 2 kids are not interested in this whatsoever, but are forced to live together. And it's pretty fun. It's really enjoyable. I like the characters a lot, actually, and I'm pretty excited to see where this goes. So, yeah. I decided to skip over Tokyo Mew Mew because I didn't feel like reading it this month. Then I read some physical manga, so I'll just show you those. So I read Hulk number 1. This one was pretty good. It took a while for it to get interesting for me, but once it did, I'm kind of hooked for the story. So I'll definitely pick up number 2 when it comes out here in a few days. So that's Hulk number 1. It's kind of a fantasy story, and it's pretty interesting. We have Komi number 22. This one finally ramped up the emotional problems again, and I'm pretty excited to see where Komi and Manbagi end up, going, with the fact that, they're actually vying for the attention of Tadano properly now, and are going to have some conflict about it at some point. Then we have Record of Ragnarok number 5 here, and generally speaking, I thought this was better than the anime that covered the same storyline, but I still don't give a shit about Jack the Ripper, and I don't understand why anyone does. Because he's a very shallow, uninteresting character. Like, at least the other characters so far are characters I didn't know from history, because I never ended up, getting into Asian history and stuff like that. Or was, like, significantly different from the mythological standpoint. So it was interesting to see it. But Jack the Ripper is, like, such a generic character. Like, there's like better versions of like serial killers, right? Like it could have been Hannibal Lecter instead, and maybe he's a real life person, but I don't know, or maybe he's not a real life person. Maybe he's just a character. But like Jack the Ripper is basically also just a character. Like I don't know why people are so fascinated with this character and with this person, and the way that they treated Jack the Ripper in this, it was like he was the biggest fucking piece of shit ever in human history, and it's like, dude, most people have done worse things than this guy, like historical people, right? And it didn't really seem all that interesting to me. And I guess this character is cool for some reason, but I don't know. I just didn't care for him. Hercules was okay, but we haven't gotten back to his backstory yet, so I'm curious to see how that goes. But yeah, that's Record of Ragnarok number 5. I really like the story. I just don't care about the fight going on right now. So, it is what it is. And we have Beauty and the Feast number 6. This one was good. Shuko finally meets all of Yamato's family, or except his dad. She hasn't met his dad yet, but she meets his mom. And his mom is like, you know what? I never get to be around my children, so you being someone that can be around them is a wonderful thing. Let me shower you in praise and gifts. And thank you very much, and I hope you continue to do this for our family. And, she just appreciates her a lot, and I think that's cool. And Yamato and Shuko's relationship kind of develops a little bit as well, which is pretty interesting. And they have this, fine, dynamic developing. And they also have this good, reminiscing moment around this this hot plate thing where they make a bunch of noodles, which is really good. I really enjoy this story a lot. It's just really, really enjoyable. We have Dress Up Darling number 7, which is a great story. This one is really good because it finally validates Gojo. It's like all of his classmates are counting on him. They all think that his work is good, and they're all really excited to see what he makes for them for this school festival. And it's just really, really good, and I really, really like it. It's just really, really beautiful and just really enjoyable. And it seems like Gojo and Mari are finally going to develop a relationship with each other that goes beyond just being friends, and I find it to be very satisfying. So this story is great. I love it so, so much. And finally, we have Gunbird Sisters, and this one was a pretty good volume. This one mostly focuses on Shannon, and it's like her development and her story. The problem is that the story is about to end in the next volume, so I don't know why we decided to take time to develop Shannon's story if we really should have just been focusing on the other stuff. But I do think that, generally speaking, it was pretty good. We did get introduced to a new character that's some sort of werewolf, and she was cute. It was a really good character. And also, we kind of see what the climax is going to be. It's going to be a big battle in the city, and Maria and them are going to have to figure out what the hell to do, because I'm pretty sure Maria's little sister, Noelle, showed up at the end of the story, and she was not what we were expecting. So I'm curious to see how that goes, and I'm really excited for Volume 4. So yeah, that's really all there is to it. That's all I read this month. It was a long video. I do apologize, but it's just how it goes. And yeah, that's really all I have to say. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know your thought. Let me know what you guys read this month. What was your favorite thing that you read this month? And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and see you guys later.